Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on the Middle Way, and next week the topic will be Thomas Paine and Independence Day. Please also note that we meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. for roundtable discussions. We're currently having discussions on the Bhagavad-Gita. Our Lodge, United Lodge of Theosophists, is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave at the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad-Gita. This is chapter 6, Devotion by Means of Self-Restraint. Krishna, he who, unattached to the fruit of his actions, performeth such actions as should be done, is both a renouncer of action and a devotee of right action. Not he who liveth without kindling the sacrificial fire and without ceremonies. Know, O son of Pandu, that what they call sannyas, or a forsaking of action, is the same as yoga, or the practice of devotion. No one without having previously renounced all intentions can be devoted. Action is said to be the means by which the wise man who is desirous of mounting to meditation may reach thereto. So cessation from action is said to be the means for him who hath reached to meditation. When he hath renounced all intentions and is devoid of attachment to action in regards to objects of sense, then he is called one who hath ascended to meditation. He should raise the self by the self. Let him not suffer the self to be lowered, for self is the friend of self, and in like manner, self is its own enemy. Self is the friend of the man who is self-conquered. So self, like a foe, hath enmity to him who is not self-conquered. The self of the man who is self-subdued and free from desire and anger is intent on the Supreme Self in heat and cold, in pain and pleasure, in honor and ignominy. The man who hath spiritual knowledge and discernment, who standeth upon the pinnacle, and hath subdued the senses, to whom gold and stone are the same, is said to be devoted. And he is esteemed among all who, whether amongst his friends and companions, in the midst of enemies or those who stand aloof, or remain neutral, with those who love and those who hate, and in the company of sinners or the righteous, is of equal mind. He who has attained to meditation should constantly strive to stay at rest in the Supreme, remaining in solitude and seclusion, having his body and his thoughts under control, without possessions and free from hope. He should, in an undefiled spot, place his seat, firm, neither too high nor too low, and made of kusa grass, which is covered with a skin and a cloth. There, for the self's purification, he should practice meditation, with his mind fixed on one point, the modifications of the thinking principle controlled, and the action of the senses and organs restrained. Keeping his body, head, and neck firm and erect, with mind determined, and gaze directed to the tip of his nose, without looking in any direction. With heart at peace and free from fear, the yogi should remain settled in the vow of a brahmacharya, his thoughts controlled, and heart fixed on me. The devotee of controlled mind, who thus always bringeth his heart to rest in the Supreme, reacheth that tranquility, the supreme assimilation with me. This divine discipline, Arjuna, is not to be attained by the man who eateth more than enough, or too little, nor by him who hath a habit of sleeping much, nor by him who is given to overwatching. Meditation which destroyeth pain is produced in him who is moderate in eating and in recreation, of moderate exertion in his actions, and regulated in sleeping and waking. When the man so living centers his heart in the true self and is exempt from attachment to all desires, he is said to have attained to yoga. Of the sage of self-centered heart, at rest and free from attachment to desires, the simile is recorded, as a lamp which is sheltered from the wind flickereth not. When regulated by the practice of yoga and at rest, seeing the self by the self, he is contented. When he becometh acquainted with that boundless bliss which is not connected with objects of the senses, and being where he is not moved from the reality, having gained which he considereth no other superior to it, and in which, being fixed, he is not moved even by the greatest grief, know that this disconnection from union with pain is distinguished as yoga, spiritual union or devotion, which is to be striven after by a man with faith and steadfastly. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Paradox seems to exist between the principle of moderation in all things and that of unreserved 100% practice of the virtues. Shall one be moderate in the exercise of honesty, patience, unselfishness, the control of mind? If one follows the middle way with respect to intentions, the result is an individual of mixed motivation, and this is no one's ideal. Wherein then lies the path of temperance and the golden mean in action. The first speaker just read from the Bhagavad-Gita that the meditation which destroyeth pain is produced in him who is moderate in eating and in recreation, a moderate exertion in his actions, and regulated in sleeping and waking. Strangely enough, this is immediately followed by the intemperate observation that when the man so living centers his heart in the true self and is exempt from attachment to all desires, he is said to have attained to yoga. To be a true exemplar of temperance in thought and action, as well as an uncompromising devotee of all the virtues, one must put the problem in the planes to which its various aspects belong. Most paradoxes can be resolved in this way. By doing so, we see that moderation in thought and action relates to quantitative considerations, while the exercise of honesty, unselfishness, humility, fearlessness, and all the other godlike powers relates to qualitative factors in human action, to attitudes and motive. There can be no compromise, no half measures in the quality of motive that prompts to action. But wherever one's choice involves the quantity of effort expended, of time spent, of food, mental or physical, of food partaken, of desires indulged, of words spoken or advice imparted, the tendency to run to the extremes of too little or too much is all too disastrously evident in human life. How necessary then to tread the middle road, to place one's seat neither too high nor too low, to preserve one's spiritual equilibrium. Resolve thou to become of man of moderation. The middle path, concentrated in Buddhism, is not peculiar to that religion alone, nor to any religion. Instinctive in all mankind is the perception that extremes are to be avoided, and that he who goes to extremes, no matter in what direction, is not to be trusted. If we examine the life of the Buddha, or Confucius, or Christ, or even of any universally esteemed among mankind at large, we find that they steered their way between extremes in their navigation of the stormy sea of life. There is ever the straight and narrow path between the whirlpool and the rock, where alone, save transit instead of wreckage, is possible. The rock on which people are wrecked is that of personality. The whirlpool, the ebb and flow of passions, desires, and the ebb and flow of passions and desires. The siren voices of the whirlpool lure us unto the rock of selfishness. In the teachings of Theosophy, great stress is placed on the fact of three distinct lines of evolution: the monadic or spiritual, the intellectual or psychic, and the physical or astral. The various heavens are associated with the monadic or spiritual, the opposite varieties of hell. The opposites of varieties of hells are typical of the physical or astral man. The soul or self is the enjoyer or sufferer of these two extremes. So what if a heaven of any kind were but a rock? Is analogic hell but a whirlpool? This can be hell too, I guess. Jesus spoke much of the kingdom of heaven. We put the stress on heaven. Perhaps he placed the emphasis on kingdom. Even in heaven, if it is a kingdom, there must be ruler and ruled, lord and subjects. Certainly the popular Christian idea of heaven has always been that of a slave's dream. A blissful servitude under a kind master. A kingdom necessarily implies a ruler, but if the mission of Jesus means anything, his message must have been intended to point the way to freedom from bondage of any kind, the emancipation of the soul. Second, then, his teachings meant for man to be the ruler, not the creature. For his own heavens and hells, for the Son to become like unto the Father. Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita makes this middle or true path the theme of the entire dialogue. The soul of man is over and over affirmed to be identical with his own, the Supreme Soul or Spirit. Over and over, the delusion is pointed out under which men suffer and enjoy hells of their own creation through the mire of ignorance. The identification of the seer with the seen, the creator with the creations. The great extreme of Confucius is but a play on words, as so often is found in the sayings of the great teachers. Life everywhere and in every state and form presents a pair of opposites to the perceiving, acting soul, perceiver, and creator, as well as creature. Says H.P.B. in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, page 440, in Writings of Confucius, quote, "The great extreme, as the commencement of changes, is the shortest and perhaps the most suggestive of all cosmogonies. For those who, like the Confucians, love virtue for its own sake and try to do good unselfishly without perpetually looking to reward and profit." Close quote. Throughout the Secret Doctrine, the opposing extremes we know as religion and science, or materialism and superstition, are shown in the light of the spirit or self in each and all. Psychism breeds superstition. Reason breeds materialism. Cold reason is the rock on which many souls founder. Psychism is a whirlpool that engulfs countless others. What then shall we do? We should steer between the two and reaffirm the integrity of the soul, reassert the divine nature of the will-born Lord in all three, the material, the astral, the intellectual, or the psychic, and three, the spiritual or monadic. All three domains of that Lord. This is a middle path which fears no failure, courts no success. This is to be the man that was, that is, and will be, for whom the hour shall never strike. We find in Volume 1 of Isis Unveiled, starting at page Roman numeral 11, that it is the Platonic philosophy, continued as Neoplatonic and Theosophical, that can alone afford us this middle ground. Although some 24 centuries have elapsed since the death of Plato, the great minds of the world are still occupied with his writings. He was, in the fullest sense of the word, the world's interpreter. And the greatest philosopher of the pre-Christian era mirrored faithfully in his works the spiritualism of the Vedic philosophers who lived thousands of years before him. Plato taught justice as subsiding in the soul of its possessor and his greatest good. Men, in proportion to their intellect, have admitted his transcendent claims, said Plato. Yet almost all of his commentators shrink from every passage which implies that his metaphysics are based on a solid foundation and not on ideal conceptions. Plato could not accept a philosophy destitute of spiritual aspirations. The two were at one with him. For this, the old Grecian sage, there was a single object of attainment, that is, real knowledge. He considered those only to be genuine philosophers or students of truth who possess the knowledge of the really existing, in opposition to the mere seeing, of the always existing, in opposition to the transitory, and of that which exists permanently in opposition to that which waxes, wanes, and is developed and destroyed alternately. Beyond all finite existences, he said, and secondary causes, all laws, ideas, and principles, there is an intelligence, or mind, the first principle of all principles, the supreme idea on which all other ideas are grounded. The monarch and lawgiver of the universe, the ultimate substance from which all things derive their being and essence, the first and efficient cause of all the order and harmony and beauty and excellency and goodness which pervades the universe, who is called by way of preeminence and excellence the supreme good, the God over all. He is not the truth nor the intelligence, but the Father of it. Though this eternal essence of things may not be perceptible by our physical senses, it may be apprehended by the mind of those who are not willfully obtuse. To you, said Jesus to his elect disciples, it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but the masses it is not given. Therefore I speak to them in parables or allegories, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. This is a quote from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 13, verses 11 and 13. The philosophy of Plato, we are assured by Porphyry of the Neoplatonic School, was taught and illustrated in the mysteries. So is the myths, Plato declares, that they were the vehicles of great truths well worth seeking. Basing all his doctrines upon the presence of the Supreme Mind, Plato taught that the nous, spirit, or rational soul of man, being generated by the Divine Father, possessed a nature kindred or even homogeneous with the divinity, and was capable of beholding the eternal realities. This faculty of contemplating reality in a direct and immediate manner belongs to God alone. The aspiration for this knowledge constitutes what is really meant by philosophy, the love of wisdom. The love of truth is inherently the love of good, and so predominating over every desire of the soul, purifying it and assimilating it to the divine, thus governing every act of the individual. It raises man to a participation and communion with divinity, and restores him to the likeness of God. This flight, says Plato, consists in becoming like God, and the assimilation is the becoming just and holy with wisdom. Out of Plato, says Ralph Waldo Emerson, come all things that are still written and debated among men of thought. He was so broad that all philosophy, European and Asiatic, was in his doctrines, and to culture and contemplation he added the nature and qualities of the poet. In the Great Master's letter, we find that, with the single exception of Buddhism, no religion has taught a practical contempt for this earthly life. For with each of them, always with the single solitary exception of Buddhism, has, through its hells and damnations, inculcated the greatest dread of death. Therefore, do we find that struggle for life raging most fiercely in Christian countries, most prevalent in Europe and America. It weakens in the pagan lands and is nearly unknown in Buddhist. There are no penitentiaries in Buddhist lands, and crime is nearly unknown among the Buddhist Tibetans, at least up until China invaded this peaceful land. The writings do not cover that part. The Doctrine of the Avatars, online at ULT-Phoenix, shows that esoteric Buddhism and genuine Theosophy are the same. The middle way relates to the Buddha's noble eightfold path as passed on by Mr. Judge in the Oriental Department Papers, dated September to October 1895, and which we'll read together now. If we pass that out, please, and we'll go over this, and we can make comments and have questions as we go, or at the end, as we all so choose. And what is being passed out is also printed here. There are two extremes, brothers, that he who has renounced should shun. On the one side, the constant following after things that appeal to lust and sensuality. A low, bestial way, unworthy, unprofitable, fit only for the profane. And on the other side, the constant following after penance for his painful, unworthy, unprofitable. Penance that is painful, unworthy, unprofitable. There is a middle path, brothers, that shuns these two extremes, a path found out by him who has come as others came before, a path that opens the eyes and gives understanding, a path that brings restfulness of mind, supreme wisdom, full enlightenment, nirvana. What then is this middle path, brothers, that shuns these two extremes? The path found out by him who has come as others came before, the path that opens the eyes and gives understanding, the path that brings restfulness of mind, supreme wisdom, full enlightenment, nirvana. It is verily the noble eightfold path. It is this: right seeing, right willing, right speaking, right behaving, right living, right striving, right concentrating, right meditating. This is the middle path, brothers, that shuns the two extremes. path found out by him who has come as others came before, the path that opens the eyes and gives understanding, the path that brings restfulness of mind, supreme wisdom, full enlightenment, nirvana. This, brothers, is the noble truth about sorrow. Birth is full of sorrow. Decay is full of sorrow. Sickness is full of sorrow. Death is full of sorrow. Contact with the pleasant is full of sorrow. Separation from the unpleasant is full of sorrow. Unsatisfied longing is full of sorrow. In a word, the 5 groups of grasping, body, sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, are full of sorrow. This, brothers, is a noble truth about sorrow. And this, brothers, is a noble truth about the cause of sorrow. It is verily the thirst that causes outward existence, accompanied by sensual enjoyment, seeking gratification now here, now there. It is the thirst for the gratification of desire, the thirst for outward existence, the thirst for present existence. This, brothers, is a noble truth about the cause of sorrow. And this, brothers, is a noble truth about the ceasing of sorrow. It is verily the destroying without any remnant of lust, of that same thirst, the putting away of, the getting rid of, the being free from, the ceasing to attain this thirst. This, brothers, is a noble truth about ceasing of sorrow. And this, brothers, is a noble truth about the path that leads to the ceasing of sorrow. It is verily the noble eightfold path. It is this: right seeing, right willing, right speaking, right behaving, right living, right striving, right concentrating, right meditating. This, brothers, is a noble truth about the destroying of sorrow. That this was the noble truth about sorrow was not, brothers, among the teachings handed down. But within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I should understand that this was a noble truth about sorrow, although it was not among the teachers handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I had understood that this was the noble truth about sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. And within me arose this light. That this, brothers, was a noble truth about the cause of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I should rid myself of the cause of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I had rid myself altogether of the cause of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. That this, brothers, was the noble truth about the ceasing of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I should bring about the ceasing of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I have brought about the ceasing of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. That this, brothers, was the noble truth about the path that leads to the ceasing of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I should become the master of the path that leads to the ceasing of sorrows, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And again, brothers, that I had become master of the path that leads to the ceasing of sorrow, although it was not among the teachings handed down. Within me arose this insight. Within me arose this knowledge. Within me arose this understanding. Within me arose this wisdom. Within me arose this light. And brothers, as long as my knowledge and insight were not quite clear about each of these four noble truths in these 3 degrees, so long as I was uncertain that I had gained full insight into the wisdom that is unexcelled in heaven or earth among all ascetics or priests or gods or men. For brothers, so as soon as my knowledge and insight became quite clear about each of these 4 noble truths in these 3 degrees, then I became certain that I had gained full insight into the wisdom that is unexcelled in heaven or earth among all ascetics or priests or gods or men. And now this knowledge and insight have arisen within me. The freedom of my heart is unshakable, and the end of birth and death for me. And this is the end of birth and death for me. Thus the Master spoke. The company of the 5 brothers, rejoicing, praised the Master's words. And when the teaching had been declared, there arose within the sage Kandanya, the insight of truth, spotless and stainless, that whatever has a beginning, and that also lies the necessity of having an end. And when that royal chariot wheel of the law had been set forward by the Master, the bright ones of the earth cried out and said, O Varanasi, Benares, at the refuge of Megadaya, the supreme will of the law has been set forth by the Master. The wheel that can never be turned back by ascetic or priest, by bright one or god or demon, or any power in the whole world. And when they heard the cry of the bright ones of the earth, the bright ones of the 4 regions of space cried out and said, in Varanasi, at the refuge of Megadaya, the supreme will of the law has been set forward by the Master, the wheel that can never be turned back by ascetic or priest, by bright one or god or demon, or any power of the whole world. And when they heard the cry of the bright ones of the 4 regions of space, the bright ones of the Lord of Death cried out and said, in Varanasi, at the refuge of Megadaya, the supreme wheel of the law has been set forward by the Master, the wheel that can never be turned back by ascetic or priest, by bright one or God or demon or any power of the whole world. And when they heard the cry of the bright ones of the Lord of Death, the bright ones of the place of bliss cried out and said, in Varanasi, at the refuge of Megadaya, the supreme wheel of the law has been set forward by the Master, the wheel that can never be turned back by ascetic or priest, by bright one or God or demon or any power of the whole world. And when they heard the cry of the bright ones of the place of bliss, the bright ones of the world of built-up vestures cried out and said, in Varanasi, at the refuge of Megadaya, the supreme wheel of the law has been set forward by the Master, the wheel that can never be turned back by ascetic or priest or bright one or God or demon or any power of the whole world. And when they heard the cry of the bright ones of the world of built-up vestures, the bright ones of the world of divinity, the bright ones of the world of divinely formed vestures cried out and said, in Varanasi, at the refuge of Megadaya, the supreme wheel of the law has been set forward by the Master, the wheel that can never be turned back by ascetic or priest, by bright one or God or demon or any power in the whole world. And when they heard the cry of the bright ones of the world of divinely formed vestures, the bright ones of the vesture of the Evolva cried out and said, in Varanasi, at the refuge of Megadaya, the supreme wheel of the law has been set forward by the Master, the wheel that can never be turned back by ascetic or priest or bright one or God or demon or any power of the whole world. Thus, in an instant, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, the cry went up, even to the world of the Evolva, and this great system of myriad worlds shook and trembled and was violently moved, and a bright, measureless light appeared in the world, stronger than even the power of the gods. This understands that this is what we are. This is what we're headed for through implementation of the philosophy. So there's a lot of repetition in here in our Western mind's opinion, but I think there's a purpose for all that repetition. I'll open the floor then for questions and comments about everything that we went over. Continue with the doctrine of the avatars, as long as we don't have questions. A strange story, a legend rather, is persistently current among these disciples of some great Himalayan gurus, and even among laymen, to the effect that Gautama, the prince of Kapilavastu, has never left the terrestrial regions, though his body died and was burnt, and his relics are preserved to this day. There is an oral tradition among the Chinese Buddhists and a written statement among the secret books of the Lamas of Tibet, as well as a tradition among the Aryans that Gautama Buddha had two doctrines, one for the masses and his lay disciples, the other for his elect, the Arhats. His policy, and after him that of his arhats, was, it appears, to refuse no admission into the ranks of candidates for arhatship, but never to divulge the final mysteries except to those who had proved themselves during long years of probation to be worthy of initiation. These, once accepted, were consecrated and initiated without distinction of race, caste, or wealth, and in the caste of his Western successor. It is the arhats who have set forth and allowed this tradition to take root in the people's mind, and it is the basis also of the later dogmatic Lamanic reincarnation of the succession of human Buddhas. This is this student's understanding of the lines laid down in Theosophy, in genuine Theosophy as well. Want to come in? Question?
Yeah. So then you put on the board three ways of evolution, which is necessary for the human soul to traverse. And then you said that the problems for human beings come when we follow the dictates of the personality. And you listed the development of the human soul dependent on the monadic, which is the spiritual, the intellectual, which is our thought process, psychic, and also physical, which is also astral. And then you ask the question, then how we are going to get out of this difficulty. Can you please comment on it?
Well,
because you said psychism leads to superstition, and reason goes towards materialism, and between these two problems, what happens to the human soul?
Well, if we don't reach up and try to get to the spiritual level, which is, I think, what you're getting to, we'll never pass that. It'll be a continuous cycle, round and round. Okay, we are on this cycle anyway, but we're on an upward spiral through natural impulse through the human phase. Once we become humans, then it's through self-induced and self-devised methods. As part of that self-induced and self-devised method, we must continue to in our road efforts to perfection, and eventually we do get recognized by the masters as those who can help us bridge that gap to the spiritual. We try to think on a spiritual level, which is all-encompassing, and we automatically know everything, and that's the general process this student understands. That you might like to add something to that.
Well, the mind principle is the key, I think, to this process. As long as we're with the intellectual mind, I don't really think we can perceive the spiritual. The intellectual mind is purely on the cold reasoning aspect of it. It does not have that divine spirituality in it, but that belongs to the higher mind. Well, the Western world does not differentiate between those two things. And I've never seen it anywhere. It's not really accepted. You talked about Plato, but Plato belongs to the period before Neoplatonists, the ones that Ammonius Saccas trained in the second and third centuries.
We are subject to error, this student understands, if we stay on the intellectual plane. Plato stood very brilliant guy. Aristotle
He was not an initiate.
was not an initiate, did not understand that process, and he stayed on the intellectual phase, and the Western world has followed him hook, line, and sinker in this student's understanding.
He was not as materialistic as we now have become, because for centuries we have followed.
Yeah, we even got worse. Yeah.
Because science has done a tremendous job in cracking that dogmatic thinking, and now we have gone to the other extreme where this skepticism has taken a hold of us, I think. Now a lot of people don't believe in anything.
Exactly. Well, that's science has done a great job of taking what came in the secret doctrine, if you will, and proving bits and pieces of it. You know, and that has been a major support. But on the same token, science does not acknowledge spirituality, except for some of the brightest minds. They've met with the Dalai Lama and tried to get in sync, and they're still, I guess they're still working on it, some of the brightest minds. But until that bridge is that gap is bridged, we're going to have this kind of thinking in the West. We are going to have the skeptical type of thinking. Until we can get to what Plato's and his predecessors and then the Neoplatonists and what Theosophy teaches, it's going to be a major struggle. And we only have a few Theosophists.
That's not
So,
true.
well, we have.
Scattered.
I'm talking about people that come to there are lots of Theosophists in the world who think like Theosophists. Lots of them. But until we can get that into the general population, it says that Plato, what he said was not accepted as anything other than an ideal. In practical terms, a lot of folks kind of backed off on what Plato said. And until we realize that that's the fact, that that's the truth, and all of this stuff is Maya that we see in the world today, it's this student's understanding that you know, we have a major journey to go through as a massive piece of people.
Well, there are a lot of people out in the world who are Theosophists because they are great philanthropists, and their mode of dissemination of wealth is ethical.
Yes.
So they're truly on the practical side of this philosophy, even if they don't know the philosophy. There are those souls also who do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. They mentally can process that and follow it. And we as Theosophists are also accused of not having practical application of this philosophy that we teach.
Mm-hmm.
But I think HPB commented about that in the key by saying that a lot of Theosophists or Theosophical students don't have the means to actually go out there and do charitable works. That for that reason, unity is extremely important in the dissemination of the philosophy, because if the students are all on the same mental level, that carries a lot of weight because it's imprinted on the Akasha, and then all those souls all around the world who are thinking in this manner are impressed by it.
I'd like to pick up on one thing you said, not having the means. We all have the means to a degree, and we need to apply whatever we have to grow. I think we have. I think I know what you said. I mean, we don't have immense wealth that we can throw money at an issue.
I don't know any Theosophical students who have billions to go start something and make a go of it.
But that's just one too.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that there are those philanthropists in our world who are actually doing good work.
Of course.
And they're ethical. And there are some scientists who are ethical. And those, I'm sure, are given hell. It's the ethics and morality that comes first. And when the, was it Salk vaccine created, he did not take anything for it. He gifted it to humanity. So there are those scientists.
But the capitalists got in the middle of that too.
Well, now they did, but not him, not when he discovered it. Yeah, so Einstein was very
his motive was correct, and that was the highest level of thing, yes.
So in this reading that we have just done, what was repeated was that life is full of sorrow, whether you look at it from the viewpoint of sickness, decay, death, birth, all of it, it says, is full of sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So through this philosophy only can we reach to nirvana,
exactly,
where that choice to come back or not to come back is presented to us when we have become a fully initiated soul into the mystery, is what this student got out of it.
Yes, and the Buddha chose to come back and try to help. And there are those who are out there and we don't know who they are. We know who the Buddha was, but we don't know others that might be around us that are doing the same thing. And
well,
we get to make that choice when we get perfected, if you will, right?
But even in the 20th century, nobody came out externally from the Master's Lodge.
Externally.
Either. But that does not mean that there wasn't one who worked with the initiates world over. We don't know anything about it. That doesn't mean there wasn't one. Externally there wasn't, but that does not mean there wasn't one. It's just that the general public doesn't know who it was that came. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I think they do it on purpose so that their work is not impeded by calamity that always comes to them as a result of humanity not understanding why they're here and what their purpose is and what they're here to do. Instead of assisting them, they become obstacles in their way, so sometimes that's what they do.
That's very true.
Very true. Here's your eightfold path specified as right seeing, right willing, right speaking, right behaving, right living, right striving, right concentrating, and right meditating.
Correct.
Well, that's quite a list.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's, for us, most of us, it takes lifetimes, many lifetimes, of practice to do that.
Perhaps.
But if we strive toward bridging that gap, we'll get there. And look at where it ends up. Even gods can't. It implies that we're rising above the gods if we do that. That's the last couple of sentences. That's what this student gets out of it anyway. But at our level of development, I mean, who would even believe that?
Believe what?
That we have within us the power to reach to those heights.
Yes, of course. Jesus said the same thing. The Master said the same thing.
He said, "You can do greater things than I." That's what Jesus said.
I don't think people believe in it.
Well, and also you said, we all have limitations. We are not all eloquent speakers, but we all can do something. We can help clarify statements by others. Those kinds of things all of us can do if we study in philosophy. And as we study it, we become it. And we actually change our physical structure, this student understands, because of that. And we are able to perceive at the spiritual level with the assistance of those who have gone on before and become masters. To continue on, it's an endless process.
Alchemical process is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
When the mind is one pointed towards philosophy and trying to come up with ways of serving humanity to the best of one's ability, that alchemical process definitely takes place. And I think it's Mr. Judge's article where it says that the elementals that constitute the human principles slowly change, and the more ethereal ones replace the more concrete ones,
right,
enabling you to see seeing, enabling you to see on the inner
that's where we are right now. We're thinking about the big circle. Okay, we've come down from spiritual, the other way around. We're in a very most material experiences we're going to have. Our job is to try to uplift ourselves primarily, but by so doing we're uplifting everything around us, and we're about right here, the student understands. When we go up to ethereal, then, that's a different process of understanding. We can only think, we can only see, most of us can only see at the material level now. But as we move along, we will then gain that insight of the 7 worlds that's talked about in the secret doctrine, ethereal as well as material. Is that right?
Well, we should consult the secret doctrine.
How about page 200? You keep referring to page 200. That's the 7 worlds.
HPB refers us to page 200, where our descent into substance or material world is shown, and we have already accomplished that. And she says, as a nation, we have now passed the midpoint, and we are circling upward towards a spirituality, but without that divine mind coming into view, we won't achieve it very fast. We have to be one-pointed towards it, but I think Mr. Judge says we have to ask, and we have to ask often, and we have to invite that higher mind to come to our
continually
existence.
Invite, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's how we get to the golden age. Those who make the golden age, that's how we get there. Thank you for joining us today, and see you next Sunday for the Independence Day talk for the United States.